dentistry can be a very isolating profession, especially if you are a solo practice owner. The importance of running your dental practice like a small business, because that is what it is. If you truly want to serve your community, you have to ensure that you have a viable ongoing business. Private practice isn't going away. I always believe that the universe has a plan for us, and we don't always understand when or why things happen. We just have to trust it.
Dr. Gerilyn Alfe, I would like to thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. And
Thank you, Ward, for having me.
yeah, well, I just wanted to, just listen to you because we had a little conversation yesterday, and I was just so happy and just enamored to a lot of the things that you were saying. It just had me stuck like glue. And I want the people to hear this in the community. So tell me, you spent 25 years in dentistry. What got you involved in dentistry in the first place?
Well, when I was in the second grade is when I think around people start asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I always had great dental experiences when I was a kid. And I just started saying, oh, I want to be a dentist when I grow up. And then luckily, once I started getting into the real meat of school, I did well in math and science. So that helped. And for a period of time, I actually thought about going into medicine, but I realized that I would have to tell somebody at some point in my career that they weren't going to live. And I didn't think that I wanted to handle that emotionally on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I kind of went back to dentistry. I also was lucky that I was pretty gifted as an artist. And so once I graduated from dental school, I started thinking about cosmetic dentistry. And when I graduated in 93, it's when cosmetic dentistry was really starting to hit its stride and it was developing a toehold within the dental community. So I kind of happened to be at the right place at the right time. And I was really lucky because early in my career, I ended up having some amazing both clinical and business mentors when I was very, very young in my dental career. And I really give them most of the credit for any successes that I had because I was just lucky to be able to learn at the feet of some amazing people. And that's part of the reason why I've always had this pay it forward part of me. I think it's just built into my DNA. And because of the fact that I was lucky enough to have some great people early, I feel the responsibility to help others move faster, move forward, make fewer mistakes, and know that there is a place to be able to have those tough conversations when you're struggling, because dentistry can be a very isolating profession, especially if you are a solo practice owner or even if you have a partner but not a large group. Because even with an amazing team, the dentist is stands by herself really. And so that's why it's so important to be part of study groups, to be part of communities like yours as well, because we need to have safe spaces for doctors to have these challenging discussions and know that they're not alone.
Yes.
Anything, I always tell my new clients, anything you're going to encounter, I'm pretty sure I have as well. I may have handled it well, or I may have screwed it up, but hopefully, with whatever I took away from it, I can help you from getting out of it quicker or hopefully preventing it 100% to begin with.
Yes, yes. So you were just a trailblazer in the clinical position, and you knew right away, obviously, and with your mentors, that hey, I mean, I need to take care of the business side too. I mean, having the right people in the right place, in the right seats, if you will, just tell us a little bit more about that conversation that you had with these two mentors.
Well, I was probably about 3 to 5 years out of dental school when I started taking hands-on courses because, like I said, this is when cosmetic dentistry really started booming. So there were tons of courses.
Mhm.
I very early in my career started learning under David Hornbrook, who anyone that does cosmetic dentistry knows who David is. And I was lucky enough that after taking a couple of his hands-on courses, I was asked to come on as a clinical instructor. And I got to learn so much every weekend that I taught, even because I was working alongside some of the best cosmetic dentists in the country. And so that was really wonderful for me. And during that time, I also had been exposed to a number of business coaches because I was lucky that my partner in my dental practice, this is when I was in New England, was very business minded. And he understood a lot sooner than a lot of other dentists did the importance of running your dental practice like a small business, because that is what it is. And even for dentists that I encounter who are not looking to just make a ton of money, just to make a ton of money, but I explained to them, if you can't run your practice successfully, you can't do the dentistry you want to do. You need to be able to have a steady income, a very reliable cash flow, so that way you can be able to provide the service to your communities. So not everyone's in it to just make tons of money. If you truly want to serve your community, you have to ensure that you have a viable ongoing business.
Mhm.
And so my first coach was through Dental Boot Camp, which has kind of been rebranded over the years. But I worked with my coach there on and off for 20 years. I worked with other coaches kind of along the way at various times just to get a fresh perspective or a different outlook. But it was that relationship which early in my career helped me become a much better leader and communicator and business person than I ever would have been without her input.
Mm.
And I started to understand the importance of knowing where the money is coming in, how quickly it's coming in, where is it coming in from. I'm speaking to any dentists that are in network with insurance companies. You know that your cash flow is not 100% the month of your production. If you're accepting assignment of benefits, you're waiting 30, 60, maybe longer to get reimbursed from those companies. And that's why it's so important to know what's the discrepancy between your actual gross production, your net production, your gross collections, and your net collections. Because your net collections are the only thing that matter. That is the money
Yeah,
that you
yeah,
can spend.
yes.
And whether it is to ensure that you can reward your team, make capital improvements within your business based off of what other amenities you want to provide to your patients, be able to afford to take the best continuing education so you can have more services to offer your patients, and really start to hone what you want your practice to be like. When I sold my practice in New England, I picked up and moved to Chicago. And within a year, I built a startup, and it was called Chicago Smile Spa. It was a boutique practice. I built by design for it to be small. It was only 3 chairs. My previous practice had 10 chairs, and we had 2 doctors, 4 hygienists, 4 assistants, 3 people at the front, an office manager. It
Yeah.
was a very large family practice.
Mhm.
As we started to get more into cosmetics, we started to just kind of shrink our practice. It just happened organically. And we realized that we actually did better and felt better when we could see fewer people per day and do more work on fewer people and really connect with our patients, because having those relationships was always super important to me.
Mhm.
And that's what I see lacking in a lot of the practices where the doctors and the team are forced to run people in and run people out. They think they can make up for their profit margin with volume, and you can't. And what you end up losing is the personal experience. I know that a lot of doctors are concerned about DSOs coming in, and there's a place for them. And I tell them, don't worry about what the other guys are doing. When I first started my practice in Chicago and I met with the bank, one of the bankers said to me, so, Dr. Alfe, what is the area around you like? And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, how many dentists are in your area? And I said, I don't know. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, well, okay, like within a 1 mile, radius. And I said, I don't know. I said, what you have to understand is I don't care. I'm not in competition with other dentists. What you need to understand is I picked my location because there was a BMW dealership across the street from me. There was a Furrier on the corner, and there were 3 Starbucks within a 4 block radius. Now, back in 2004, that was a huge determination as to whether or not a neighborhood could sustain a cosmetic practice, because the Starbucks did all their research. So I just like rode their coattails. I knew that they picked their locations because they knew that there were people in their areas who had disposable income and who wanted to pay extra for value and service.
Mm.
So I positioned myself in that area, knowing full well that if I marketed myself correctly, the right people would find me. So I spent more on marketing than what most people do, but what they don't understand is because I was insurance independent and fee for service from the start, I
Mm.
collected close to 100% of what I produced. So
Oh.
what doctors don't understand is that when they're in network with insurance companies, they are writing off 30 to 40% of their production right off of the top line. You're never going to be able to collect that, which
Mhm.
is why their cash flow can very much be up and down from month to month. For us, because we worked with ideal scheduling, we used block scheduling, we really adhered to that. I always presented the best possible treatment for my patients. My team and I were very well versed in verbal skills. I knew how to read the people that were sitting in my chair so I could connect with them, talk to them about what they valued, how my solution would fulfill their values. And then the most important thing is after I explained everything, I asked, what questions did you have? Did I explain that well? And the most important question is, and are you ready to get started? Because too often doctors will present their treatment and the patient will say, okay, do you understand that all? Yep. And the doctor walks out thinking, okay, great, that patient's going to schedule. But when they run their reports and they see that, gee, my treatment acceptance is lower than 50% or 40% of what I presented, it's because they never take the time to connect with that patient as a person. And once you can start to do that and get trained in how to be able to read those subtle cues, listen for the words that your patients use, and then be able to present what is best for them in the way that they want to hear it, that's when you start to get more patients saying yes.
Mm.
And as long as you and your team are always coming from a place of 100% ethics, which I know everyone that's listening to this is, even when I started in Chicago, I had zero patients when I opened my doors. I was a brand new startup in basically a brand new city. I was only there for about a year before I opened my doors.
Mm.
But I told my team, no matter what, the numbers are important, but we never make decisions based solely on the numbers. Yes, we have our daily goals. Yes, we have our monthly goals. Yes, there are certain, milestones that we want to hit, but it never comes at the detriment of the patient. You have to understand, know, and believe in your heart always that if I recommend something, it is in the best interest of the patient. Because when you do that, the money follows. When
Mhm.
you do the right things for the right reasons, the
Mhm.
money will follow. I always 100% believed that. And when I started the startup, a lot of people would ask me, "Oh God, how are you sleeping at night? It must be so stressful. I know how much it is to build a startup and you're not taking insurance, you don't have a new patient flow coming in on a regular basis." I truly never lost a moment's sleep over it. I was so bought in to my vision for this practice. And I told my team, I will close the doors on this practice before I will sign up to be part of an insurance company again. Like
Mm.
I refused to do it. It was something that was so inherent for me that I know how much it damages the patient relationship. And I just refused to practice like that. So it was either all or nothing. And that saying about, I forget which military leader it was, but they were invading somewhere and he told the people to burn the boats because once they landed, they burned the boats. So there was no turning back. They were 100% committed to being in this new place. And that was the philosophy I had is burn the boats. Like we need to all be 100% aligned in how we're going to treat our patients, the kind of dentistry we're going to do, what kind of customer service we're going to provide. And when you provide personalized service, there will always be people who will value that. And whether or not they can 100% discretionarily afford it, they will find a way to afford it if it's something that is important to them. So private practice isn't going away. People that are worrying about it, they needn't spend the time on that. Focus on what you can do better in your practice. Make it so that your patients never want to leave you no matter what happens outside those front doors of yours.
Mhm. So when you started the new practice in Chicago, had you already studied and got your MBA, or was that something that came along a
That
little
came after I sold my last practice. So I had three back surgeries over the course of 10 years. And my surgeon had said after the first one, yeah, Gerilyn, you really need to start thinking about another career. Well, I was 32 when I had the first one. I was so not ready to be retired. So when I had the last one, I said, okay, I need to start working on a longer range plan to be able to, step away. And I eked out another 7 years. Part of it was that I started standing instead of sitting when I was taking care of my patients, which makes an enormous improvement in your posture and therefore my back. I started doing yoga every day and I wore loops and I had light and all that other stuff. So I did as much as I could to help with the ergonomics. But I knew that at the 25th year, I was kind of just treading water and I needed to make a decision before it had to be made for me. I mean, it kind of was, but it was still my choice when I did step away. And I had already started working on an MBA program online because as a solo practice owner, I couldn't see being able to take off a week every month to go to a course or give up every single weekend for 2 years to get my degree. So I researched online courses, found a great one, the Jack Welch Management Academy, and I ended up doing that. And I started taking courses while I was going through the process of selling the practice. That July, this is in 2017, that July, my mom passed unexpectedly. She unfortunately had a heart attack and just was gone, and we were not expecting it at all. But I always believe that the universe has a plan for us, and we don't always understand when or why things happen. We just have to trust it. And as hard as that time was for me, I thought about what could be great about this. And the great thing about it was that my mom passed without pain, without having her body deteriorate, without losing her mind. Those were huge concerns for her when she was her whole life. She was very much a caregiver. She never wanted to be the one taking care. And so I'm an only child. My dad still lived in the Boston area. And all of this just fell into place because I was in the process of extricating myself from my practice. I was able to still continue doing my studies online. And now I had the freedom to be able to fly back and forth to Boston, every few weeks to help my dad out during this very difficult time. I sold my practice on September 11th of 2017. So for once, that date has a good connotation for me. And then I just, really ramped up my MBA. And so I got it done in 2 years rather than three, which is what they had expected when you're doing it while you're also working.
Mhm, mhm.
But a lot of what I learned in that program was helpful. It reinforced things I had learned from my coach or books that I had read. I am a voracious reader, and I got to a point in my career where I wasn't taking so much CE for clinical stuff. I was taking a lot of CE or reading books or listening to webinars or listening to podcasts about leadership, about communication, about, personal growth. And all of those things helped my practice because I would take all of the things that I learned and, I joke this is the only time an amalgam is good, but I made an amalgam of all the things that I learned and then I used it when I was running my practice. I
Mhm.
also use a lot of that when I'm coaching my clients now. So the concepts that I talk to clients about there's no eureka moment when I talk about ideal scheduling or, how do you go ahead with a new patient visit? Any of the things that we talk about, the protocols, the systems, the procedures, they're all the same. It's just a matter of when you're working with someone, do you trust that person implicitly? Because to work with your coach, you have to be safe enough to be vulnerable because that's the only way that I can help them. And I tell people all the time, I'm kind of like a therapist.
Mhm.
Whereas if you hold something back, I can't help you get past it. And with my MBA program, a lot of it was really based on leadership skills. So a lot of the things that I already kind of knew and was doing some of, it just really strengthened it for me. And it was really from my coaches, my business coaches, when I was practicing for about 20 years, where I learned the basics about how to run a business, how to read your financial reports, what are important KPIs for you to keep track of, how to figure out how you can start to plan for your future. Because, a lot of doctors, they think that, oh, well, my nest egg is when I sell my practice. That's going to be their, big windfall, and they're going to get X amount of dollars, and that's their pension, and that's their retirement. And when I met with my bankers and my first financial planner, when I moved to Chicago, I said, we need to figure out and map out my future. And I want two things. One, I want to have the ability to walk away by 52. And this was way before I started having all these back problems.
Oh,
And two, you can't factor in practice sale at all when we're figuring out that I will be financially independent to be able to walk away at that point in my life. And they looked at me like I was nuts. And I said, listen, I am building this practice. And if it goes the way that I'm planning, it won't have much inherent value because it is going to be super specialized. And if I and my team do our jobs well, there should be almost no outstanding treatment because my goal is that anyone that comes in, we recommend treatment, they move forward with it, and then they just go into my hygiene wheel. But it's not like a lot of other practices where we say you have a gold mine in your charts because there's a bunch of stuff that was discussed and never done. But I didn't want that for my practice model. And so they were kind of flabbergasted by me. They didn't know what to do. And I said, you just got to, just with what I have right now, with the ability I have to earn over the next 15 years or so, we need to be able to know that I'm building it so that I can retire if I want to at 52. And we can't expect that I'm going to get a huge amount for the practice sale. And let's start from there. And when I did retire, I was 50.
Oh, wow. A couple of years ahead. So how did, first, I got a couple questions. So how long did it take you to become profitable when you first started that dental smile spa?
Yeah, so when I started Chicago Smile Spa, I mean, I was turning a profit within the first 12 months. And it was slower than if I had been doing true general dentistry because I had a very specific patient in mind. And so, because my marketing was very targeted for that, the
Mm.
other challenge I had is that I used to joke, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a cosmetic dentist, especially in Chicago. I mean, Ward, this area, it has a lot of cosmetic dentists. And because it's not a specialty that's recognized by the ADA, anyone can call him or herself a cosmetic dentist.
Mhm.
So I really had to lean on my chops that I had, that I was an instructor for, one of the most prestigious cosmetic dental continuing education courses, that I took thousands of hours of CE every year, that I was always on the forefront, that I was involved with a number of dental companies as a KOL and as an author and as a lecturer.
Mm.
And, my reputation began to build. I got very involved with small business groups in my area. I joined the Chamber of Commerce. I started doing some work with what was it called? Modern Luxury Magazine, because that was my target group, right? So I did a little bit of advertising with them, but what I actually did that was more influential is I developed a relationship with the editor. And so I got invited to all of their functions. So I got to network with potential patients. And that was really what helped build my practice as well as it did from the get go. The other thing that I did that a lot of dentists weren't doing back then, so you got to, go in the time machine back to 2004. Websites were out there, the internet was out there, nothing like what it is now, of course. My website was up and running for 3 months before my practice opened. So I was already getting a footprint online with very targeted marketing for the types of patients that I wanted based on the kind of work I wanted to do. And so I was doing all the work before I even opened my doors. I have a favorite phrase, which is you don't dig the well when you're thirsty. So as my practice was being built, I had left the place that I was working as an associate to be able to just focus on this. And I spent that 3 months before we opened our doors getting my team trained in everything. We did a lot of role playing on verbal skills, ways to talk to patients. We made sure that all of our software was in place, all of our systems were in place. And as soon as that door was ready to open, we were ready to go. And it's not like my phone was ringing off the hook the first few months, but I did slowly start to grow a base. And because I truly believe that when you elevate the patient experience, they become part of your marketing team. And not being afraid to ask your patients to refer their family and friends, have a little bonus in there for them, and make it so that they want to be able to bring people they love to you so that they can experience this as well. And it was really, very much a grassroots way of building the practice. When Facebook and Instagram started to really take hold, I started doing, I never paid for ads on there, but I, built a page on each of them and we would post regularly. We'd do videos. I would have video testimonials from patients after I had either completed an orthodontic case or done a veneer case. I did also a lot of TMD treatment. And so having patients talk about the first time in their life that they were pain free is very powerful, as you can imagine. So people have to be comfortable with their patients to be able to ask them for help with these things. And when you serve your patients really well in a selfless way, they are more than happy to help support you and, scream how wonderful you are from the mountaintops. But you can't do that if you haven't built a relationship with those people yet. And it's really hard to do that when you're seeing 20 to 30 people a day.
Mhm. So how did things go with the transition when you decided to say, okay, it's time to go, and at 50 you're out of the door? Did you wind up selling it for more than what you had anticipated, or was that a surprise, a cherry on top? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it was nice that I got what I got for it because, like I said, I was planning on it being really low,
Yeah, right.
and because I had almost no debt, it was a benefit as well for that.
Yes.
And like I said, I stayed on for about another 6 months. The guys that bought my practice, they brought in an associate to work there. They owned a few practices and they had purchased my space for the location basically. So
Mhm.
I stayed on because I had to finish up some cases. I had, implant restorations I was finishing, or orthodontic cases I was finishing, or smile design cases or full mouth rehabs that I was just doing follow up. So I was in there for about another 3 months, close to full time, seeing my patients and also introducing the new doctor to as many patients as I could. And then the last 3 to 6 months, I was just there when I needed to be in to, see a patient here and there. And that's why I was focusing mostly on my MBA program at that point. So yeah, it was a nice little cherry on the top because like I said, I really had it in my head that if I walk away and get zero, I just close the doors because I knew that it was going to be really challenging to find another me to buy my practice. It was such a specialized practice. You had to have the emotional gravitas to take care of those kinds of patients. You can imagine that if it's a fee for service practice that focuses on cosmetics and discretionary spending, these patients are a little bit more demanding than the regular type. Doesn't mean that they're unreasonable. It just means that they need to be handled a little bit differently. So you have to have somebody who's comfortable enough in his or her own skin to be able to take care of those types of patients and anticipate any of their needs.
Mhm.
And you also had to have a tremendous amount of clinical skills to be able to continue on the kind of work that I was doing. And so when I put my practice up for sale, I did it when I did because I told you I retired at 50. I did it because I thought I could get it sold by 52 or 53, which is what I told you was my original thing when I talked to my financial planner. I said, I want to be able to financially walk away at 52.
Mhm.
And, I got 3 LOIs within like the first month or two. Two just fell by the wayside. One of them, I really liked the guys that were looking to buy, and I think we would have been a really good fit. The challenge for me is that they wanted me to stay on full time for a year. And this was before I had all this stuff happening with my mom and my family. But because of the type of dentistry I did, if I stayed on for a year, I would be there for another 2 to 3 years because I did long range treatment. And so it wasn't a general practice where I could see somebody, prep a crown, 3 weeks later, seat it, and then walk away. I was starting orthodontic cases, which could be 6 to 12 months long. I was starting full mouth rehab cases. If I was treating pain patients, those take months to be able to complete. And I never considered starting a case that I couldn't finish. I wasn't going to have somebody else take over my case for me. So that was really the only reason I didn't pick this other group that had made the offer because I thought, well, then I'm definitely tied in for 2 to 3 years. And then what happens? Like the last year, I don't really see any patients. I'm just kind of treading water, finishing up my cases, and it was just too nebulous that I just didn't feel comfortable about it. So I made the decision, and one of the guys actually offered me a little bit more than what I had accepted, simply because the people that made the offer to me gave me the ability to be able to basically walk away as soon as I wanted. And because I did feel such a responsibility to my patients, that is why I stayed for, 6 to 9 months after, just finishing up my cases and trying to get the new doctor acclimated as best as possible, so my patients would feel comfortable with her too.
Hmm.
So, there are many decisions that you have to make in your life where it can't always just be about the money. And
Yes.
I know that this is what, you specialize in, but I think you have to make decisions so that you have uh, enough of a nest egg so that you're not making decisions based solely on the money.
Hmm.
You have to be able to have some stability in your financial life so that when you're presented with some choices, there may be a choice that you decide on that isn't as much money as the other choice, but it fits into what other things are important to you at that point in your life. So for me, I was feeling like this is the first time in my professional career and as an adult that I have the freedom to travel, that I have the freedom to do something on a weekend, on a weeknight. I mean, my friends used to joke with me that I was like a hermit from Sunday night to Wednesday night. I didn't go out. I didn't do anything. If there was a business thing, I would go, but I would leave as soon as the doors were open, I was out of there because I started seeing patients at 7 a.m. on Wednesdays and Thursdays. So I was getting up at like 4:30 because I work out before I start my work day. And it wasn't fair to anybody if I was out until 10 or 11. And so I would never do social stuff until Thursday night. And then it was like Thursday night, I would do social stuff. Friday night, I usually stayed in because on Friday mornings, I would get up, go to the gym, and then I'd go to the office and work on the business stuff of the office for a couple of hours. And then I would basically just kind of decompress that day and just relax, chill, read a little bit, do whatever I felt like doing. And then Saturday was a little bit more social. And then Sunday I was getting ready to, start my work week again. So I had a very regimented schedule for years and years and years. And I'm kind of a regimented person, so it's not like it's that big of a deal for me. But I also had just started dating my now husband, and he loves travel. And so I realized that this is a really important part of his life, and I want to take part in that. So again, I could never have scripted it as well as it ended up, but everything fell into place in the right way. Aside, like, of course, I don't wish that my mom had passed when she passed, but when she did, everything else was kind of around me to help support me during that very difficult time in the best way possible that it could have been. Because if I was still practicing, full steam ahead, I'm not saying I wouldn't have gone out to Boston every other weekend to help out my dad. I would have done whatever I needed to do. It just would have made it very, very difficult for me. And so things happen for a reason.
So then with that regimen and that discipline that you brought to your dental practice, moving into the business as a consultant, wow, it just seems like a marriage made in heaven. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when I got done with practicing, I was thinking about, part of the reason I went to my MBA program was because I also wanted to see what else is out there. What other job opportunities are there? There were so many other industries that I had zero exposure to and zero knowledge of. And I thought maybe there's something else out there that I would be really well suited for.
Mhm.
And after going through my program and after talking to friends of mine that have worked in, corporate America or anything like that for a period of time, I realized, why am I trying to extricate myself from a world in which I am very comfortable, am knowledgeable, and have a number of great connections? Like, why do I want to just step away from the dental world? It didn't make sense. So when I was wrapping up at my practice, a lot of my patients were asking me, so Dr. Alfe, are you going to go teach now? Because they knew that I taught a lot in addition to practicing. And I said, well, the thing is, when you stop practicing clinically, it's really hard to teach clinical courses. You lose some of your, what's the word I'm looking for? You just don't have the same chops, right? You get viewed differently if you're not practicing anymore. So I knew that I had maybe a year that I could still teach some clinical courses, but that was going to be it once I stepped away from the chair. And I said, so the only other option is I go teach at a dental school. And I said, "Do you know how much they pay those people? It is laughable." And I am not built to work for others. The reason I was an entrepreneur for 21 of my 25 years is because I may not always have the right answer, but I can't stand people telling me what to do. And so, I want to figure it out on my own, even if it's wrong. This is one of the things, Ward, that you and I were talking about yesterday. I think a lot of the times that dentists get stuck is because I think it's partly our DNA. We're drawn to dentistry because of how we are, but then it's really drilled into us, no pun intended, while we're in dental school, that everything you do has to be perfect the first time. And if you make a mistake, it's catastrophic. And the reality is that's not how life works. And because dentists in general tend to be very cautious people, they have great risk averse. And so they either analyze, and get that analysis paralysis when they have to make a decision and postpone pulling the trigger on anything because they're so afraid that they're going to make the wrong decision.
Mhm.
We all make wrong decisions, bad decisions. Every single one of us does that. What distinguishes people that are successful and ones that stay stuck are the ones that are successful are okay with jumping without having all the information, without knowing if the ground below them is actually coming up at 100 feet a minute or 2,000 feet a minute, but they trust that the parachute is going to work. And they are evaluating as they are jumping. Is the wind right? They're correcting their course as they go. Well, say that they land badly, they use it as a learning experience instead of feeling like, oh, that was a failure. I can never do that again.
Mm.
And you have to view everything that you're doing in your practice as almost everything is reversible. I know as dentists, almost everything we do is irreversible, which is really, that's why I think dentists have such a hard time with that mind shift. But there are very few things that we do as a leader and a business owner that are irreversible. What you have to remember is that if you make a decision, just make sure that you make a commitment to yourself to constantly evaluate how this is going. Is it bringing me toward the resolution and the result that I want? And as soon as you realize you're a little bit off course or it's not working out, you need to stop, evaluate. Do you need to change a process? Do you need to view it in a different way? Do you need to step back a little bit and reevaluate? But don't feel like just because you made the decision, you're married to it until it's done. And then you're dealing with maybe it didn't turn out exactly the way that you wanted it. But again, you have to look at it like it's not a failure, it's a learning experience. Anyone that is super successful in any career has more failures than so many people's regular successes because they realize that this is something that if I don't know it yet, the only way that I'm going to figure out if it's going to work is to do it.
Mhm.
And so you have to just jump in and trust. Like, I'm not saying do things recklessly. You have to have enough information to be able to make a calculated decision. But there's a great quote by Colin Powell, and he said, you should never make a decision with less than 40% of the information, but don't wait until you have more than 70%. Because if you make a decision with less than 40%, you have a good chance of making a very bad decision. But if you wait until you have more than 70%, the opportunity may be lost by the time that you actually do something.
That is so.
And I remember reading that quote from General Powell years ago, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is exactly what every dentist needs to hear
Mhm.
because we are never going to know everything. And you have to just trust. So you prepare yourself and then you trust that it's going to work out. You get all the pieces in place, you surround yourself with the right people, and you make sure that you're all rowing in the same direction. And you just got to have each other's back and trust it.
Yeah, because quite frankly, many years ago, I mean, some people probably, they see something new, they probably had a little time to make adjustments to get involved or make a decision to get involved. Today, technology is not going to allow you to do that.
Yeah.
No, things are zipping right past you, and like you said, if you can get 40% of the information, you don't have to know everything. Delegate.
Hmm.
Yeah. So,
Yes.
I mean, some of the most challenging periods that you had, either in it's your choice, either in the dental or the business consulting space.
So I think probably the The most challenging part for me when I was practicing was 2010. So in 2008, anyone that's old enough to remember that period of time, you know that when there's a national financial thing crisis that happens, it usually starts on the coasts and then works its way to the middle.
Mhm.
Well, in 2008 and 2009, I had friends on each coast who were really struggling. And I actually had my best year to date in 2009 because two reasons. One, it hadn't really hit Chicago yet. Two, I had so many patients who worked in finance who saw the writing on the wall and were starting to make career changes ahead of the curve, finally had the time to do the dental work that they wanted to do because before that they never had the time. They always had the money. But now they looked at it and said, hey, you know what, Dr. Alfe, I'm going to have job interviews coming up. I would really like to have a smile that I'm comfortable with before I go in for those. I finally have the time to do it. You don't have to squeeze me in at 7 a.m. and make sure I'm out the door by 7:45 so I can get down to the Merc. So it was a very interesting time. And I think because I was raised, this is partly a New England thing, but also a lot, my parents grew up in the Depression.
Mm.
I was, it was ingrained in me that you don't spend everything you make.
Mhm.
I don't carry credit card debt. I don't charge something if I can't get that paid off each month because that is like one of the biggest money sucks. I'm sure, Ward, you've got 18 hours worth of information on that alone.
Yes.
So whenever we had really good months, I would always just kind of keep that money so that it was liquid enough for me to be able to use it if at all possible. But picking, some sort of investments where I could at least be earning some interest. It wasn't just sitting in my bank account, but I could liquidate it whenever necessary. And because of the fact that I am such a planner and like I said, it's weird because when I moved to Chicago and started, my startup from scratch, people are like, "Oh my God, you must be so comfortable with risk." And I said, the weirdest thing is that I'm actually very comfortable with big risk, but I sometimes can overanalyze like tiny little decisions. And so, like, which is very bizarre. People are usually the opposite, right? Where they can make a snap decision about something as easy as like, what do I want for lunch today? Versus, hey, should we pick up and move 1,000 miles away from where I grew up and then start a practice from scratch, where about five people?
Of
Yeah,
course.
let's do that. Um, but so because of the fact that we had such a great year, I kept that money, as my nest egg, basically, as my safety net. And everything started to really hit Chicago in 2010.
Mhm.
And because of the fact that no matter what, I always was marketing because that's what I see a lot of dentists make the mistake. They start to get a ton of new patients coming in and then they start to pull back on their marketing. But unfortunately, by the time they realize that it's going to hit them, they now have gaps in their schedule and they try to revamp their marketing. Well, they forget that it takes time to vamp it back up again. So I always kept that going. But as you can imagine, because the economic crisis had hit us finally, people didn't have as much discretionary income. And because my practice was about 80% cosmetics, I still had my general practice within it. But, the bulk of what I was doing, my most profitable stuff, were the things that people just weren't paying for at that point. So I remember after about 6 months into 2010, and I was meeting with my team. We would have monthly meetings, and I said, I was very transparent with the numbers. They all knew, what was coming in, what was going out. I didn't hide anything from the team aside from what I paid myself. That's the only thing that's really not their business. But they needed to understand the ins and outs of what it takes to run a practice so that they could be mindful if they came to me and said, "Hey, Dr. Alfie, I want a $5 raise, or I think you should give us $1,000 bonus." Well, guess what? If we're not profitable, that money's coming out of my pocket. So they all knew where we were. And I said to them, we have to stay the course. We have to trust that we know this is going to turn around. We don't know when, but we just keep doing what we've been doing. We don't start to skimp on things. And I told you that there was like one point in my career where I said, if I have to sign up to be part of an insurance company, I will close the effing doors. And so like it was at that meeting where I said, because one of them said, well, do you think that maybe we should just like, maybe we should sign up for Delta because they're so big? I'm like, oh my God, they're the worst one. No. I said, do you want to work for half your salary? And they said, no. I said, well, you're asking us to work for half our salary. I refuse to do that. I will let this practice die before I will do that.
Yeah.
And because they knew that I had that conviction,
Mhm.
they were behind me. So I did make some adjustments. Like I didn't take home as much on a regular basis. I had enough that I was able to live. I wasn't like, eating only ramen noodles every single night or anything. But, I made some adjustments to my personal life so that I could just ride this out and not stress about it. And I really didn't stress about it. I just said, this is a blip. This too shall pass.
Mhm.
And I know that we're going to come out a year from now, stronger and better. And the fact that we are not cutting things like everyone else is will resonate with our patients. They're still going to get the same amazing service. We're not cutting corners on anything. They pay us a decent fee for what we provide, and I'm not going to change any of that. And, a lot of times your team just needs to know that the leader has that conviction.
Mhm.
Because when your leader is 100% clear on the vision for her practice, for her team, for, what the mission statement is for the practice as to how the patients are to be treated, then they can get behind you if they're the right people, of course. You have to be very wise about whom you choose to work with you.
Mhm.
But I knew that we were going to be fine.
Mhm.
I would have liked if we were making more money that year, but we still did fine. I didn't, I ended up in the black at the end of the year. I still was able to pay myself and take distribution and, do all that other stuff. So, that's the thing about dentistry. More than anything else, you don't necessarily have a guaranteed salary like you do if you work for a big corporation. But my friends that have work for big corporations, they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you could do that. You don't know from month to month. I'm like, well, you kind of don't either. You could get fired at any moment. Like you don't even think about that.
That's right.
And again, if it means that I have a little more uncertainty in my life, but I get to call the shots and I get to build this world that I was so passionate about, I'll take the uncertainty any day.
Mm, mm. That's a wonderful story. A wonderful story. So tell us a little bit about what's to come, what's new, um, how are things going with the business consulting program that you have going right now, and uh, what are you taking with you that you take that you that you're I mean, there's so much. I shouldn't even ask you that question. That is so much to ask of you. But some of the, I guess the top three things that you take with you to move into the business that you're doing now with other dentists.
Yeah, so whenever I talk to a new lead, a new potential client,
Mhm.
almost across the board, the reasons that they're seeking help fall into one of three categories. They either tell me, Gerilyn, my schedule is a mess. It's either way too busy but not productive, or I've got gaps. The second thing is that my team either isn't getting along or they don't listen to me or they don't follow through. And the third is that my finances are concerning. And
Oh,
I say to them, doctor, what you have to understand is that number three is showing up because of either one and or two.
oh,
Because if you don't have strong systems in place, if you don't have a well defined team that
mhm,
is as cross trained as possible, depending upon where you practice,
mhm,
if you don't have understanding of your finances, and if you aren't marketing and internally as well as externally on a regular basis, you're going to be struggling. And so that's when you notice that you have financial problems. In the years that I've been coaching,
mhm,
it's very rare if I look at a practice's finances and their overhead is out of whack. It's very rare that I tell them they have to slash costs. Many times I walk into a new office and I don't do as much in person anymore. I've really pivoted to doing one on one coaching with the doctor via Zoom because, for one thing, it allows me to do it from anywhere. But also, the more that I was doing it, because I worked for another company for 3 years as a coach when I first started. And again, I just decided I'm not built to work for anybody. I need to just do my own thing. So I left and started my own
Am I
company.
doing?
Yeah, yeah. So, and because of the fact that like I said before, everything that I've learned over the past 30 plus years, I take a little bit from here, a little bit from there. And so my coaching approach is very unique compared to a lot of the bigger companies that are out there that tend to be very cookie cutter. What I continually hear from my clients is that they, one, love the fact that I'm a dentist because they can talk to me about dentistry differently from they could talk to a coach who is only a business coach. And, I've been out of the game for 8 years. So there are things that are happening clinically that I'm not 100% aware of, but I certainly can still talk to them about the processes because those don't really change. And I can certainly empathize when they're having a patient issue because that never changes. And it's also that no matter what, I don't have I don't have a set schedule for my clients in the fact the first month we're going to be covering this, and in the second month we're going to cover this, and in the third month we're going to cover this, which is how most other coaching companies work. I basically just dive into what is bothering you the most right now, what causes you the most pain, what causes you to stay up at night, because that's what we need to work on.
Mhm.
And many times, and you know this too, Ward, from working with all of your clients, what they think is the problem is actually the symptom.
Mm.
And so we have to dive in and say, well, you're having problems with your team. Okay, let's figure out why. Was it you didn't hire as well as you could have? Did you not train them as well as you could have? Do they not have enough support? There are always a number of factors that create the symptom. And the symptom is the only thing that most people focus on is like, I'm in pain, but that's not what causes the pain. That's just the leftover stuff. So being able to pivot very quickly and handle whatever it is that is most painful for them at the moment makes me different from most of the big companies that are much more cookie cutter. And so I think that that is what I bring to the table.
Mhm.
In addition to the fact that, like I said, one of the other things that I bring in a lot with my coaching is you probably have heard of traction, the EOS system.
Absolutely.
Because yeah, I mean, and the reason that I talk to my doctors about it is because doctors love cookbooks. When it comes to procedures, we want to know, okay, after I do one, two, three, what do I have to do next?
Mhm.
And, we think very linearly.
Mhm.
And I've studied so many different business models and ways to improve your business. And for whatever reason, it just 100% clicked with me a few years back. And
Mhm.
I said, this is so simple and yet so powerful.
Mhm.
And so I have incorporated that with a number of my offices to varying degrees. A couple of them are really going gangbusters with it. And the others, I just kind of bring in some of the concepts,
Mhm.
but it makes it so much more streamlined.
It does.
And I think that the biggest thing that doctors need to focus on is you need to get your house in order first
Mhm.
before you start worrying about the other stuff. Because if you don't have systems in place, if you
Mhm.
don't have clear cut protocols, if
Mhm.
you don't have your team as well trained as possible,
Mhm.
there should be a checklist for every single thing that is done in the practice. My patients loved the fact that I was so anal retentive about this stuff. I mean, anytime I was doing anything besides a very routine dental visit, anytime I was doing an ortho case or a smile design case, definitely a full mouth rehab,
Mhm.
we had a printed off checklist that we hung on the cabinet. And so as we went through each step, my assistant would cross off. So if I had to get up and go do a hygiene exam, I walked right back into the room. I knew exactly where we were. We never missed anything. So it was the first year I was open when the Checklist Manifesto, that book came out. One of my patients bought it for me. He brought it in and he said, Dr. Alfe, this book was written for you. And I said, oh my gosh, I've never heard of this, Bob. He's like, you will love this book. And I loved that book. And so, but I say to all my clients, if you don't have a clear-cut checklist for every single thing about how to answer the phone, how to make an appointment, how to discuss financial arrangements, you have that all for your clinical stuff. You
Mhm.
and your assistant know what needs to come first, second, third, fourth. You
Mhm.
let the rest of the team just kind of flounder and figure it out on their own. And then you get upset when an appointment falls off the books. Well, if you don't have a protocol
Mhm.
as to how do you discuss with a patient before they schedule what the financial obligations are, how they can pay for this, what their expectation is when they come in, before you reserve that appointment? If the doctor hasn't made a commitment with the patient before the doctor leaves the room that the patient's ready to move forward, if the rest of the team isn't supporting the doctor to ensure that that patient understands the treatment and that we've spoken to what's most important to them, if you don't do exquisite handoffs from person to person so that the patient feels comfortable that we're all on the same page, we all know what's going on with their particular case, then it makes it really hard to start to grow exponentially because you're always going to be putting out fires. There
Mhm.
are always going to be small fires, but we want it to be, a flash fire. We don't want it to be a brush fire.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so when you have all those things in place, it makes it much easier to deal with the inevitable hiccups that happen on a day-to-day basis. And you don't have to, then you don't have to sweat the small stuff so much.
Interesting. I do want to find out before we have to close on it because we haven't even scratched the surface. Um, but I want to help with sharing. Could you share with the audience your approach? I mean, it don't have to be, specific. You can be general because I don't want you giving up your total playbook. But but if you could share just some of your approaches to marketing, because obviously you're a master at that. You have to be.
Yeah, so like we talked about yesterday, Ward, most of my clients find me by word of mouth. So I do go through phases where I'm really active in some of my social media
Mhm.
platforms. I go through times when, for whatever reason, I might have to step back a little bit, and because I am a small shop, and my team have other full-time jobs, so it's more of a support team for me. But staying present online, and I'm not looking to necessarily get a new client from my LinkedIn feed. What I want to do is to be able to stay in front of people, have them get to know me as a person. And that way, when they encounter somebody who might need my help, they'll feel comfortable enough being able to recommend me or at least point them in my direction. I'm involved with a small networking group. It's similar to BNI, so there's only one of us in each industry in that, and I've been involved with them for the last 5 years. It's Best Practices Network. It's based in Chicago. And I have gotten a number of referrals from those people because, again, we meet every month. They really know me as a person, and they know that I'm no nonsense. I learned a great phrase from another coach when I first started, and he used to always say, "I'm not going to always tell you what you want to hear, but I will always tell you what you need to hear." And what clients have to understand is that I'm not necessarily there to be their friend. The same way when I was a leader of my dental team, I wasn't there to be their friend. It doesn't mean I don't care deeply about them. It
Mhm.
means that my responsibility is to help you become as successful as possible. And I felt that way about my team when I was practicing as well.
Mhm.
And so being able to help doctors grow into the CEO of their business, to grow into the best leader that they possibly can be for their team, to help them hone their vision for their practice. Because once you have that crystal clear and you have the right people in the right seats, then that's when you really start to blossom. And I have clients that have been with me since I started that have doubled their production and collections. One of my practices, we have slashed her overhead from 82% when I first started working with her to last month, it was at 48%.
Massive.
That's real money.
Yeah.
That is real money. And the irony is that not all of my clients started working with me just to make more money. A
Mhm.
few of them started working with me because their practices were out of control. They felt burnt out. In a good way where they had too many patients. Their schedule was so overbooked, and hygiene was booked out 8, 9, 10 months, and they just felt like they needed to change something. And so for a couple of them, I have them at the point where they are completely out of every insurance company. They're, not all of them are fee for service at this point, meaning that they still do accept assignment of benefits from those companies, but they are out of every network. And the irony is they're not slowing down. Like they mostly decided to do it because they thought it would free up a little bit. They had too many patients. But when you do the right things, your patients never want to leave. They have had such a minimal drop in patients in spite of all the financial hurdles they're throwing in front of these patients because they love them. They don't want to go anywhere else. So, I have a couple of things in the pipeline with them, which I won't share, but we've got some plans on how they can get their arms around this a little bit better. But those are the real changes that I get so much pleasure out of being a part of with those people and just being able to see my clients grow where often we start out and they are unsure, especially for some of the younger dentists. You may have team members that are older than you. And if you're not 100% confident and those team members have been there longer than you have, it can be easy to sort of cow to whatever it is that they're talking or cower to whatever it is that they want to do. And you have to wear that mantle of leadership. And this is one of the times that I think it's okay to have imposter syndrome. You have to at least, give the appearance that you've got it and you know what's going on. Even if you come home and cry in your pillow that night, I don't care, but you show up with your game face the next day because eventually it will become part of you. It will no longer be just a facade. Mm-hmm. And being able to see my clients getting to the point now where they are making the hard decisions that in the past they would have rolled over and let the team, or whatever the situation is, they would have sacrificed themselves for everybody else. And they're not mercenary about how they deal with it now. They just won't take any poop anymore. And so it's really nice because to be an effective leader, you have to make the hard decisions and you have to realize that not everyone's going to be happy about this. But is it in the best interest of the practice? Mm-hmm. I train all my teams. They have to understand that there is a hierarchy of service when you work in healthcare. Mm-hmm. It is patients first, team second, and self last. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter if that self is the doctor or the assistant or the hygienist or the admin person. You have to think along those lines. If you have team members that don't live by that hierarchy of service, they need to go. Mm. Because the biggest point of friction that I find in every office is when you have somebody that always puts herself before the team and her patients. And that's not sustainable.
That is so true. Wow. We've already done an hour and 5 minutes. So I'm wondering, I'm wondering at some point, we're gonna have to bring you back because, like, as I mentioned earlier, you're just scratching the surface here. You really have a lot to share. Is there anything that I know there's a ton that we missed, but is there anything that you want to share right now that we haven't today?
Well, like I said, I think that dentistry can be a very isolating profession. And certainly after everything that happened with the shutdown, I saw practices close. I saw friends and colleagues wrestle with depression, deal with potential bankruptcy because of what had happened. And they really we were forced to pull back. There were no meetings in person anymore. And it depends on where you live, but for some areas, it lasted for 2, 3 years. And then depending upon how you viewed all of that, if you were nervous to go out, then you really isolated yourself even more. And the challenge with social media, while it can be helpful to feel like you're connected, you're really not connected all that much with those people. So you have to remember to take those things with a grain of salt and be really mindful of where you're spending your online time. So that's why institutions like yours with the Wealthy Dentist podcast, the community that you have built are with like-minded people who are looking to pull each other up. And many times I talk to my clients who they may be on some Facebook, groups, and they're telling me the kind of junk that people are talking about. I'm like, why are you part of this? Just remove yourself from the group. Like, why are you even wasting your time and energy listening to this? It's kind of like when COVID happened, I did not turn on the news for a couple of weeks because I knew that they didn't know anything yet. And so the first time I went into an office right after that, I did a poll of the entire team. And I said, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is I can't drag myself out of bed, and 10 is I feel ready to go run a marathon. Where do you put your emotional health during COVID? And across the board, most of the people gave themselves a 3 or a 4. A couple had a higher score. And I said, okay, for those of you that gave yourself a 3 or a 4, let me ask you this. How did you spend your time? And they all said, I was watching television. I said, what specifically were you watching? I was watching the news. I'm like, bingo. You were feeding the demons.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying don't be informed.
Right.
I'm saying, take what you're being told with a grain of salt when it needs to be treated that way. And it's the same way with the groups that some dentists are involved with that I just listened and I'm like, oh my gosh, why would you even want to waste your time and energy with these people? Like they're what I call negative energy vampires, some of them. So when you have a community like yours, Ward, that's really important because you want to be able to surround yourself with people that are either dealing with the same issues and will not judge you for it. And you're always going to have some people that have already gone through it who will help support you because when you surround yourself with the right people, you are setting yourself up for more success. They have that old saying, show me your 5 closest friends and I'll tell you all about yourself. And it's true. So I think that that's really important. I think that online has a great place, but like everything, DSOs have a place, but it's not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the social media groups, they have a place, but it's not for everybody. So be mindful of the groups in which you insert yourself so that you can surround yourself with people that are doing the things that you want to do. Jim Rohn said, success leaves clues. So, surround yourself with people that you want to emulate because the best of them are more than happy to share with you because it's not a competition. I always say the only person I'm in competition with is the person I was yesterday or my microphone as it broke. But I don't care what other people are doing. I don't care what other coaching companies are doing, or consulting companies. All I care about is how can I make myself a better coach for my clients tomorrow?
Oh, that's so much confidence, man. And we really need to be there and not really have a problem with being uncomfortable. I love it. I love it. So thank you so much, Dr. Alfe, for joining us today. Definitely want to bring you back at some point. Um, Appreciate it and want you to keep doing what you're doing because people need you.
Thank you, Ward. They need you too.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a great honor to be part of this. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. The Wealthy Dentist podcast is built on connections, opportunities, and meaningful conversations that help jumpstart careers and boost the ROI on your business. Is there a topic you're passionate about or someone in the dental community who should share their story with us? We want to hear from you. Email your suggestions to the Wealthy Dentist Podcast at gmail.com and let's create content that informs, inspires, and uplifts the dental world. Your ideas could spark our next big conversation. Let's make it happen. I'm Ward Powell, your host at the Wealthy Dentist Podcast, thanking you for being a part of our journey.